synthesis mechanism, where you go back to literature and look at the existing knowledge, rapidly synthesize that and come up with smart recommendations. And although it exists, it requires to be heightened, it requires to be strengthened, to be able to speak to the local situation and take notice. The second thing is that to the audience is that we don't lack knowledge. There is plenty of knowledge, but how to synthesize this knowledge and use it? That ability to use is where the issue is now coming in. We have public and private universities being able to generate a lot of evidence, but how do we use this evidence? That one is still an issue for us to explore. As a scientist, I can tell you one of the hallmarks or the excitement of a scientist is when the recommendations from primary and secondary research becomes or finds their way to policy, practice, and programming. This is a hallmark of a scientist, that it's a big contribution to the society. And therefore, one of the things we observed during the COVID is that a number of scientists became think tanks, and they were able to put their knowledge and synthesis, and the Ministry of Health and also the Council of Governors were able to take up these synthesis recommendations, and they were able to put forward a strong case. So the third thing is that adaptability of the findings. Most of the time, as researchers, we do make recommendations, but not all of them do find their way to policy, practice, and programming. They need to come up with smart recommendations, and also to request that there is a lot of local knowledge that is still there that needs to be synthesized. COVID-19 taught us the community at large, whether it's the academia, whether it's the research institution working together, there is a lot of local knowledge that can be harvested and learned and synthesized and repackaged to inform better decision making. These are my three areas. And one take-home message is that let's not be scared with new innovation, new technology. It's said that recommendations actually take about 3 years in Kenya to actually find their way or to be enacted by either local government or national government. We need to be like Rwanda, which takes very positive results, research findings. It takes Rwanda 30 days. Kenya, 3 years. Why? Because we are risk averse. Most of our managers are risk averse. And therefore, no matter how much the synthesis, the rapid synthesis output, if we are not able to use the research recommendations, they end up in the bookshelf, and somebody is also going to pick them somewhere. Remember, somebody said that if you cannot use it, don't do it. So let's use what there is. Let's take the risk and use what is locally available, because our students at the universities, they are generating credible research findings.
Okay. Dr. Kariuki, I'll have to ask you to make your final point, please.
My final point is this. Let's create a win-win situation for all of them. Strengthen the rapid research mechanism synthesis to take up the research. There is no one fit size to all the local health problems. Research will still remain a continuous part. Thank you.
Dr. Kariuki, very insightful indeed. I think it really struck me when you spoke about us being a nation that's risk averse. Why is it in other countries something that would take a couple of days takes months for approval in this country? And it's time for scientists to think further on smart recommendations and adaptability of their recommendations to ensure that they are tested out in the real world and not just in labs. Well, earlier on, we were listening to Professor Anzala, Omo Anzala, immunologist, virologist at the University of Nairobi. I think we now have him on. If not, we'll be forced to continue with the next panel.
Okay. You can hear me now?
Yes, I can, Prof. Continue.
Yes. So the future, really, what we want to look at is that we were modeling and looking at case management and also looking at research. And what became apparent in this country is that there were just two things that were apparent. One, coordination. Two, issues of data. We have a lot of data in this country, but that data is scattered all over the ministries and very hard to get. So when we are modeling this outbreak, that was one of the major problems. So in the way forward, as I'm going to suggest, is that I would like us to put together some form of a coalition that will be responsible at One Health. And this will look at COVID now, but also look into the future. As I've said, I've given you a sense of where outbreaks are coming from. So this coalition, or as the minister said, Kenyan CDC, will be looking at virology and virology studies, to be looking at human-animal interface, because this is going to change, because climate is a big issue. It will be looking at vector adaptation, because I can tell you, we are beginning to see mosquitoes in places where there were no before. We are also beginning to see mosquitoes transmit infections that were not transmitting before. These are the information that we need for early warning signs. We want to look at epidemiology.
Okay, Prof, I'm going to have to cut you off there. And as I give you your last 30 seconds, please say something about the search for a vaccine that many are eagerly awaiting, even those who are watching this broadcast today.
Yes, the other aspect of this is that the issue is that we are not safe until all of us are safe. And all of us are going to be safe if we have a safe and effective vaccine. And I'm on record saying that Kenya should actually put together a COVID vaccine consortium that will actually look for funds. And these studies of vaccines must also be done here to ensure safety, to ensure efficacy before they are rolled out. So I'll stop there and wait for questions. Thank you.
Professor Nzala, Dr. Kariuki, great minds. I know we've not exhausted the wealth of knowledge that you have in the time that we have. Hopefully we'll get one or two more of your thoughts via questions. But let me immediately take you to the next session, and we'll be focusing on from data to action. How can we leverage on data to respond to the challenges that we've seen in COVID-19 and the disruption that it's brought about, from the allocation of medical resources to economic recovery policies as well? What role does data play in all this? And I'll be having two speakers on this next session. Dr. Kama Rogo, who's a health expert, will be the first speaker, followed by Mr. MacDonald George Obudho, who is a director of population and social statistics at the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. And of course, remember, you can weigh in on this discussion online as well. The hashtag is COVID-19 Conference KE. We're at Council of Governors on all social media platforms, and we'll try and take some of your feedback as well. But Dr. Rogo, I believe you're ready. Please talk to us a little bit about how to move from data to action. You have 5 minutes. Please proceed.
Thank you, Aigo. I'm addressing you from the village, so I hope that the internet holds. Data is the new currency for managing health and managing development. So if you don't have a data, you're not managing anything. A couple of years ago, addressing 300 top Kenyan health researchers in Naivasha, I asked them in passing how many of them, by show of hands, had seen their research translated into policy or action. There was only one out of 300 top Kenyan researchers. We moved on further to find out why that was happening, and we identified 3 areas of major deficit that going to plague our ability to move from research to action. And confidence that our leaders have on us. It is easier for a research assistant sent by Gates Foundation to make his way to State House and meet the president than a senior researcher from Cambridge. That needs to be sorted out. 2, confidence deficit in local funding. Most of our research is funded by donors. The money that the government gives us research institutions goes into salaries. There's no point paying somebody a salary if he has no microscope and he has no reagents. But since these monies are coming from outside, we also have a third deficit, which is a deficit on focus, and who pays the piper calls the tune. So a lot of the research that we're doing is not to answer questions that are being asked by Wanjiku in the village, but brought in by the funder, who is moderating everything. This brings us to the 4th deficit, which is a deficit in ownership. What you don't pay for, you don't own. So when the results come out, then who uses it? If you go to the Library of Conference or Library of, in the US, you will find that a lot of work that is done in Kenya is being used out there. Kenyans don't even know about it. So who owns this thing? If we are fifth is a deficit creating new institutions
Okay, Dr.
between
Rogo.
universities and so
Dr.
on.
Rogo, you had warned us that you are live from the village. We seem to have a challenge with your sound. Let's try and get that sorted, and I'll give you another minute or so to wind up. You really were getting into some points I know a lot of Kenyans are concerned about. If data is a new currency, and if we have a lot of knowledge in this country, why is it not producing the results that many would like to see? Joining Dr. Kama Rogo to speak about from data to action is Mr. McDonald George Obudho, who's a director with the Population and National Statistics at the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. Mr. Obudho, over to you.
Thank you so much, Bwana Waiga Mwaura, and good afternoon to all of the participants in this group. Now, from my discussion is actually branching from the formation of the National Coordination Committee on the response of the coronavirus pandemic, which was done by the government, and from it, we had another committee, a subcommittee that was dealing with the national economic and business response. So when it comes to this, we actually require data for us to really see the impact of the COVID-19. And this is how the Bureau actually comes on board to ensure that data is available for informed decision making, including the policies and the interventions that the government and all other stakeholders will be having. So in this case, we actually had to conduct surveys on the impact of COVID-19. And one of the things that we had to do was to, first of all, come up with a frame which was not available before. Because the approach that this one required is that we could not reach people in person or the respondents in person. We had to depend on telephone for us to conduct the interviews. And that brought us to the conduct of a survey using the telephone, which is the computer-assisted telephone interview, the CATI. This is something that we have not done as a bureau before, but we had to develop a frame, which we did. And from it, we are able to come up with the questionnaires and get to understand what is it that is required of this activity for us to provide the same. So within it, we have been, we were able to conduct 2 waves of the survey. It was done at the national level. Our interest was also to have it reported at the county level. Unfortunately, the sample size could not really allow us to do that, the same to urban rural. So 2 waves of this survey was done. And the key areas that we focused on to look at the impacts of the COVID-19 covered on the economic activities, that is work related, then transport, the ease with which to get transport by then, and then education activities, rent, do you have ability to pay rent in full and in good time? If you are not able to pay in full, are you able to do it partially or not at all? Then, you know, that kind of information will really help stakeholders to decide on how best to help those who are in problems. Now, the others were based on the food security, knowledge of COVID-19, because you see now when the government is coming up with the publicity and intervention, it is necessary for the government actually to get to know to what extent have people gotten the information so that they are able to keep safe from this. And then came the coping mechanisms, which we had to look into details. How are people coping up with the education situation, food, a lack of finances or enough finances, and even health related issues. Then there was also the element of the cash transfers and remittances, where we're looking at now when we have problems with within repayment of our loans, how do we negotiate with the banks and circles so that we are people are still not, are able to meet the obligations and also get a way of survival. And of course, at this point in time, there have been quite a bit of domestic violence, which we also tried to look at in our survey. Now, there are arrays of activities that indicators that we needed to generate, but of course, with the telephonic type of questionnaire, you cannot accommodate so much. So now the key thing is how well then is this kind of information utilized? That becomes the key thing. And of course, from the Bureau of Statistics, we ensure that our information is widely disseminated. Colleagues, I think if you go to our website, which is www.knbs.or.ke, you'll be able to see the 2 waves of the surveys that we have conducted in line with the COVID-19. So, but data is basically used, as I conclude, data is basically used to get to where we can now have interventions put in place by various players. It is also helpful when you're looking at the emerging issues. What is it that is likely to come up which was not there before? Then it is also helping develop the trends that can also help you get to see what is going to happen in future. And of course, lastly, it's about making informed decisions when you have the correct information. And this is what actually we stand for as a Bureau of Statistics. Thank you, Waiga Maura.
Thank you so much there, Mr. George Obudho MacDonald, of course, the Director of Population and Social Statistics, KNBS, talking a little bit about what data has shown them on coping mechanisms, food and finances at this time of the disruption brought about by COVID-19, cash transfers as well, and how data can be used to improve the lives of Kenyans. And of course, we did have Dr. Rogo on a bit earlier. He made quite some strong points. I don't know if we can still give him a minute or two if we have sorted his sound and clarity of signal. Dr. if you can hear me, you said that what you don't pay for, you don't own. Please continue from there.
6